Hello guys, this is Denvic RL, and in this video I'm going to be doing some predictions for the 2025 RLCS World Championship. Now last year you might have seen that I did a video on the 2024 World Championship, so I'm basically going to be doing the same thing again this year. So first things first, we have the play-ins. So first series is MIBR versus Genji. I'm pretty sure MIBR was Corinthians from South America, and they're playing Genji. So I'm gonna give this a 3-1 to Genji. Second series we have Team Rock versus Foot. Now obviously Foot is the team from SSA. They're the imports from SSA, you know, the really rude EU Spanish guys. Basically, yeah, no one really likes this team, to be honest. I'm gonna give it a 3-0. Or actually, I'll give it a 3-1 because Foot have actually threatened taking series off teams before. I'm pretty sure in the last LAN as well, EWC, they actually took a series off Virtus Pro. So they can be somewhat decent, so you can't underestimate them, to be fair. So I'll say 3-1. Rebellion versus Virtus Pro. I would expect this to go 3-0, but I'm going to give it a 3-1 actually. I'm going to give it a 3-1. Ninjas versus TSM. I think Ninjas, if they play in form, this should be a 3-0, to be honest. Yeah. So let's do lower quarterfinals. So MIBR versus Foot. I'm going to give this a 3-2. I feel like Foot will kind of surprise us here, and I still think MIBR will win, but they have shown that they can take series off some of these lower seed teams like Virtus Pro. So I don't really want to underestimate them going into this LAN. So I'm going to say 3-2. Maybe at a chance they take the series, but I think most likely MIBR will win this. Virtus Pro versus TSM. So this is probably one of the closest matchups so far. Virtus Pro, decent APAC team, and then TSM from OCE. I would probably lean towards OCE in this matchup, but there is the chance of it going either way. Now we move on to upper semi-finals. So you have Genji versus Rock. I'm going to say 3-2 to Genji for this. I think right now I'm rating Genji over Rock. I haven't really seen Rock play that much, but they are the third seed from MENA. So I guess we'll have to see how it goes, but I'm going to give it to Genji for now. Rebellion versus Ninjas. Now, I think Ninjas should be able to take this series against Rebellion. So I'm going to say, I'm going to say 3-1 for this one. I don't think it's going to be that close. If we get an on-form Ninjas in Pyjamas, we'll have to see. Okay, so now we have Rebellion versus MIBR. Honestly, I don't know. We could get the Sam upset, I don't know. I'm just going to give it 3-2 to Rebellion, to be honest. Not much to say. And then Rock versus TSM. I don't really know how the third MENA seed is going to perform. It's kind of a tough one to predict, to be honest. I really don't know. I'm not really that high on OCE right now, to be honest. But I don't really know how good MENA third seed is. I'm going to just say, screw it, give it to Rock, 3-2. So, yeah, these are your teams that, according to me, would qualify for the main event. So now we'll move on to the main event. So we have all these teams. We have Group A, we have Group B. So start off with Group A. So we have Carmine versus Rebellion. Obviously, Carmine Corp are going to win this. This will probably just be 3-0. Really, it's Carmine Corp, And then GK versus Ultimates. Now, this GK team, right, they're going to be the hardest team to predict in this tournament. Because if you watched EWC, you saw that they got second place, right? very marvellous run from GK, especially as a fan of them myself, so I have a bit of bias towards them. I don't really know what GK we're going to get in this tournament. If we get the on-form GK, I would say GK take this series, but I just genuinely don't know if we'll get that GK or not. But I think I'm just going to say screw it, and let's say we do get that GK. Okay, I'm going to give it a 3-2 to GK. I'm going to say they beat Ultimates. I'm going to say screw it, we get that GK. Okay, we move on. Dignitas versus Genji. Dignitas have been a solid team all season, solid. They've beaten good teams, they've beaten Vitality, they made top 2 at the last major. I have to give it to Dignitas on this one. I'm going to say a 3-1 to Dignitas. Furia versus Wildcard. Now, Furia, they didn't have the best showing at the previous EWC LAN, but I do feel like if we get the Furia that we know, this should be a Furia win. I'm going to give this one a 3-1 as well. So, on to the lower quarterfinals, Rebellion versus Ultimates. This should be an Ultimates win if we get the Ultimates that we've known all season. So, I'm going to give this to Rebellion here. I'm going to say 3-1 for this one too, because I think there is a notable gap between these two teams. Genji versus Wildcard, this should be a Genji win, but I'm going to say 3-2 to Genji. 3-1 actually, let's go 3-1. Okay, Carmine versus GK. So, GK have beaten Carmine Corp before, but that was earlier on in the season while they were on their run to qualify for Birmingham, and they were able to beat them 4-0 in the grand finals. But since then, they haven't really shown that same level versus Carmine, and I do think, overall Carmine have GK's number. They've beaten them every other time, so I'd give this to Carmine. But I will say there is potential for the upset. I'm going to give this a 3-1 though. I feel like if we get on-form Carmine, it's not going to be that close of a series. Moving on to Dig versus Furia. Just because Dig have been the more consistent team this season, I would give it to them. I'm going to say, we're going to give it a 3-2. If we get the on-form Furia, this could be fairly close. But I'm going to give it to Dig on this one. Furia versus Ultimates. That's quite a tough one, to be honest. But I would probably give it to Ultimates. If Furia continue their disappointing trend, it's obviously going to Ultimates. But Ultimates also didn't do that well in EWC, if I remember correctly. So, it's an interesting one. It's quite a hard one to predict. I'm just going to say 3-2. This could honestly go either way. I think this is one of the hardest series to predict. Same as the GK versus Ultimates one here. But we'll see. And GK versus Genji, I think GK should have Genji handily if they show their form, assuming that they do beat Ultimates early on here. So I'm going to say 3-2 because Genji can be a very good team as well. It could honestly go either way, but I reckon GK will take the win. Now we move on to Group B. So, we have a Mina versus Mina matchup first off. Now, Vulcans won the previous major and they got top 4 at EWC. Very good, solid team. Probably, honestly, they're top 2 in the world, realistically, right now. And you would have to, kind of rank them. They're one of the favourites to win this entire thing, realistically. So, obviously, I'm going to give this probably 3-1 or 3-0. 3-1. I don't know how Rock play. I just don't really know a lot about them, so it's kind of harder for me to say, especially since I haven't watched Mina a whole lot. I've never seen these two teams play. But yeah, that would be my scoreline. Vitality versus Space Station. Space Station, pretty decent team, but I feel like a lot of their prowess is mainly online. They haven't really shown as great of a level on LAN. And Vitality have been pretty solid so far this season, so I'm going to give it to Vitality. I'm going to say 3-1 to Vitality. NRG versus Ninjas. I would say this has the potential to be close. I'll always go with NRG as the favourite, but this has the potential to be decent. But I'll give this to NRG, especially because Ninjas had to qualify through LCQ. Twisted versus Secret. A lot of these matches in uppers in Group B seem to be like, like they have the potential to be close, but not necessarily will be close. It just depends on form. I think this will be the closest of them easily. Twisted versus Secret. I'm going to give it a 3-2, but I'm going to give Twisted the edge here. I think I've been more impressed with her form this season. Rock versus Space Station. I do think Space Station should be able to get a win against Mina 3rd seed, but we'll have to see. I'm going to say this will be close. I'm going to give it a 3-2. Ninjas versus Secret. I'm going to say Secret did show pretty good form in the previous EWC LAN. I do think, though, Ninjas should be able to take this dub. But it'll be a 3-2. If the Radosin effect goes crazy, honestly, could be even less of a close series. But just to say this could go either way, I'm going to give it a 3-2. Okay, on to the upper semi-finals. Now, this is going to be a banger matchup, right? We're not on to best of 7s yet. You're still best of 5. This will be a banger. If you watched EWC, you saw that 3rd place match, right? That was a banger of a match. Some good clips in that match. Very close. Went down to Game 7 overtime, I think. I would still give Falcons the edge over Vitality always, but I reckon this will be probably one of the best series so far in this tournament. NRG versus Twisted. This should be a handy win for NRG, to be honest. I'm going to say 3-1 here. And then we move on. So we have Space Station versus Twisted. I'm going to give Twisted the win over here because I'm not really too high on SSG on LAN. So I would give Twisted the win here. But could it be close? I might put 3-1. I'm going to give it a 3-1 actually. And then Vitality versus Ninjas. You kind of have to just give it to Vitality. They've been the better team all season. Depends what Radosin we get though. But I'm going to say it could be close. I'm going to give it a 3-2 to Vitality. Okay, so now we move on to the final part of the tournament, the playoffs. And we already have some really good matchups, honestly. Some really banger matchups. Like, genuinely the most, honestly. So, Carmine versus NRG. Based on what we've seen all season, I do think, NRG have definitely been a step below Carmine this season, so you have to give it to Carmine. But I'm going to say 3-2. Could be, actually, it's best of 7 now. I'm going to say 4-2 to Carmine Corp. And then Falcons versus Dig. Dignitas have been a good team all season. Falcons, top 2 team of the season. But Dignitas haven't been able to beat Falcons once at all this season. So I see no reason to think that they'll be able to do it in the World Championship of all things. Anything could happen. But I'm going to have to say, I'm going to have to give this a 4-2. I'll give it a 4-2. I feel like I'm being a bit generous here because in the last major, these two teams played in the grand finals and it was 4-1, I think. Despite how good Dig looked in that final game, especially Joris, he was popping off like crazy. But that series still went to 4-1. But I'll give it a 4-2. I'll be nice to Dig. I'll give it a 4-2. GK versus Vitality. This is a tough one for me because I know GK were barely able to beat Vitality in the previous LAN. They were doing really well in the beginning. Vitality powered up a bit. It got to game 7, but it just wasn't enough to beat GK. I feel like this time things are going to be different though. I think this time Vitality will take down GK. I feel like this is where GK's run ends. I would love to see GK go further, but I feel like they're going to need to sustain that form again. If they can sustain it, I think they'll beat Vitality. But I think I'm going to give it to Vitality, because I do kind of believe in them making this run as well to the grand finals. They may make it, they may not, but anyways, I've been yapping a bit too much about this series. I'm going to give it a 4, let's say 4-3. Let's say 4-3. And then Twisted versus Ultimates. This is a bit of a tricky one to predict. I'm going to go Ultimates, but I think whichever team wins this series, they're not going to go past lower quarterfinals. But let's say I'm going to give it 4-2 to Ultimates. NRG versus Vitality. Okay, this matchup is not as hard to predict as it may seem. Because if you've watched this season, Vitality have had NRG's number all season. You know, Monkey Moon is the enemy of NRG fans and NRG as a whole. So you have to give Vitality the win. I'm going to say 4-2. You know, even to be generous here. But Vitality have NRG's number. Can't see NRG winning this series. I think this will be the end for NRG. Dignitas versus Ultimates. Dignitas, you know, very, very good team. Very good team. Ultimates have been solid. They got top 2 at Birmingham, but they haven't really shown that same level since, I don't think. I would have to give Dignitas the edge here based on recent form and obviously EWC and all that as well. I'd have to give them the edge. I'm going to give this another 4-2. I feel like I'm giving a lot of 4-2s right now, but, you know, I don't think there will be that many sweeps, but in practice, that ends up not being true usually. But I'll say 4-2. So now we reach the semi-finals. You can see it's quite stacked, you know. I would argue you've got the top 2 teams of the season. Dignitas have been honestly consistently good as well. Vitality, honestly, if they're on form, they can definitely be here as well. But I feel like this is going to be where Vitality's run ends. I know we talk about Rod's Monkey Moon quite a bit and how he always levels up during Worlds. If he genuinely does it again, right? If he genuinely is able to do it again, I think, you know, Vitality will finally be able to get their win here. But I have to go with the safe prediction and just say Falcons are going to make the grand final again. So I'm going to give it 4-3 to Falcons. I think this will be a banger. We already had a previous matchup here. This is a rematch, but I think Falcons are just going to win again. Carmine versus Dig. Carmine are obviously the favourites here. Dignitas have been able to beat Carmine in convincing fashion before in a regional grand finals. They haven't shown that they can do it on LAN yet, I don't think. But, you know, I'm going to say, I think this could go the distance as well. Or it's more like I hope it goes the distance. I'll say it goes either 4-3 or 4-2. But Carmine will come out with the dub. So this leads to our grand finals with, of course, the top 2 teams of the season. Falcons versus Carmine Corp. I really do think this is a series that can go either way, to be honest. It's obviously not going to be a 4-3 because grand finals never end up. But if we do get these 2 teams, it probably will, actually. It probably will. Like, if we get these 2 teams, it's going to be peak entertainment because these are the top 2 teams. Now, I think for storyline's sake, you probably want Carmine Corp to win just because Vatira hasn't got a world championship yet and he is really good at the game and he needs his world championship. So, I'm going to give it to Carmine Corp, and also the fact that they did win last EWC. So currently, right now, you could say they're the best team heading into Worlds. So logically, I'm going to have to give it to Carmine Corp. We're going to give it a 4-3 to Carmine Corp. And there we have it. Those are my predictions for the RLCS World Championship 2025. And yeah, so I hope you enjoyed me having my little yap. Actually, there's something I forgot. There's also the 1v1 component. So, honestly, I would want Morksy to win. I'm going to say 4-3 to Morksy. So, 4-3 Morksy. We'll just give it like that. But, anyways, yeah. I hope you enjoyed me yapping a little bit. I quite enjoyed doing my predictions, and it just helps me to be able to do my pick stops. So, yeah. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.